Hey guys, welcome to the review. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about What We Do in the Shadows Season 4, American Horror Story Season 2, Harley Quinn Season 3, and Cobra Kai Season 5. So starting out with What We Do in the Shadows Season 4, I think What We Do in the Shadows peaked with the second season. I think that season is spectacular, and I think Season 3 was a little bit lesser than that, and I think this season is maybe the worst one so far. I do still think it's funny, but Season 2 was just especially exceptional, and I keep watching hoping that it'll get really good again, but that hasn't really happened. I do like what they did with Colin Robinson. I think that was a great way to shake things up and to, get out of the routine and to do something, different and interesting, but I don't think that overall I like the season. I wasn't crazy about the whole nightclub thing. I think for an episode or two that would have been fine, but not for the whole thing. Matt Berry, who plays Laszlo, is easily my favorite part of the show, but he can only overpronounce things for so long before it gets kind of stale. And I was kind of interested in what they were doing with Guillermo and his relationship and his sort of interaction with the vampires now after all this time. I don't know how I feel about the Djinn. I don't think I was crazy about the Djinn. I think overall I was just kind of disappointed in the show, and I hope it picks up again. But it just wasn't as good as Season 2. Then, moving on to American Horror Stories, I think this season of American Horror Stories is pretty much better than the first one, in my personal opinion. Just going to go through the episodes, talking about which ones I liked, which ones I didn't. Starting out with the first episode, Dollhouse. I think Dollhouse was a really strong start, and I think it used its time very well. Also, with it being a secret prequel to Coven, that was pretty interesting. I think Dollhouse is definitely a very good way to start the season. Then the episode after that, Aura, I wasn't as crazy about this episode. I was intrigued by the mystery because I really didn't know what was going on or where it was going with the whole security system on the door. And I do really admire the show for getting very dark at the end in a way that I think didn't feel very American Horror Story. But I admired it for being different, and it felt like I was watching a darker show, but in a way that didn't bother me, in a way that I thought was pretty bold. Then the third episode, Drive. Drive was definitely one of my favorites of this season. I had guessed the twists getting closer to the end, and I think anything other than that would have been kind of boring, but the twist was really cool and interesting and well done. Just visually, I think I was able to put it together, but that didn't take away from me thinking that it was a clever idea and sort of a twist on the whole urban legend of driving with the flashing lights and all that. Then the next episode, episode 4, Milkmaids. Milkmaids was really disgusting and uncomfortable to watch. I think that the time period is interesting, but I think it was probably one of my least favorite episodes of the season. It was just really gross, but that's not why I didn't like it so much. I just thought that it was kind of hollow and uninteresting, I guess. Milkmaids was not really one that I enjoyed very much. Then there was episode 5, Bloody Mary. I really enjoyed this episode. I think it utilized its time well. It set up the characters very quickly, and it set up the issue very well. I think this one I really appreciated just because, again, it was another one that didn't feel like American Horror Story. It felt like more its own thing that happened to be in this anthology. And then the design for Bloody Mary herself was very uncomfortable, and it was very unsettling, and they did a really good job with the makeup. And then just everything with the twist at the end, that was all great. It wasn't anything that I saw coming, and I really thought that it was cool the way that they did it, and I found the ending pretty effective. Then there was Facelift. Facelift is very much in the style of the Twilight Zone episode In the Eye of the Beholder with the pig-nosed people, and I do think this is one of my least favorite episodes, but in terms of the setup of the premise, I think it's really interesting and well done. But again, it sort of just feels like a remake of that Twilight Zone episode, so on some level it doesn't feel entirely original. So I did think Facelift was just okay. Then moving on to Necro. Necro is probably my favorite episode of the season. Again, it felt very different from American Horror Story, and I think this episode did the setup for the main character very well. I thought that she was a pretty interesting character, and then for her to sort of divulge into this madness and for us to see where it went, I thought that was all really well done. and I think the ending, as over the top as it is, was pretty well done as well. And then the last episode, Lake, I also found to be pretty forgettable. I think, again, in premise, it's somewhat interesting, but I don't really have a lot of it stuck in my mind just because I wasn't entirely invested in it. So those were my overall thoughts on American Horror Story Season 2. Necro is definitely my favorite episode. If you're going to watch any of them, I definitely recommend that one. And I do think that this show is an improvement in its second season. And I hope that it continues, because I do prefer the anthology format than having to watch 13 episodes. I do like the seasons of American Horror Story just as a whole thing, but sometimes it feels like it tacks on extra stuff in the last 2 or 3 episodes in a way that doesn't entirely seem necessary. Other times it is interesting, but you don't have the issue with a true anthology show where each episode is different. Then we're moving on to Harley Quinn Season 3. So Harley Quinn, the animated series, is one of my favorite TV shows on at the moment, somewhat, because I do think that this third season was my least favorite. It did really do some interesting stuff. I like all the stuff with Swamp Thing, but something that I like about those first 2 seasons, especially that first season, is that it sort of just plays in the DC sandbox, and I feel like this episode did that less. And there were some good episodes here and there, but overall I feel like we didn't accomplish as much as we did in those first 2 seasons. I do think the ending of Season 2 kind of went off the rails a bit with the whole Dr. Psycho arc, if you've seen the show. But if you haven't seen the show, I do highly recommend it. It is very funny, and it's zany, and it's a really entertaining and funny show. It's just, I think Season 3 is slightly lesser than the previous seasons, especially the first one. I think Season 1 of the show is really great. But all the voice acting is great. It's interesting to see Poison Ivy and Harley in a relationship, and for that to continue, and seeing the sort of dynamic there. And I really love the psychology of Joker getting into their heads and showing Ivy that she's really not treating Ivy or Harley as differently as he did to Harley. I also really love this universe's interpretation of Bruce Wayne. I love him being kind of wimpy and anxious, and him being crazy enough to bring his parents back from the dead in the finale. I also really was not expecting the return of Dr. Psycho towards the end of the show. Easily one of my favorite characters in the series, and I love him as part of the group. I was worried they were just going to fully write him off as the villain after the second season. But yeah, Tony Hale's return as Dr. Psycho was unexpected, and it was welcomed. I also have no desire to hear the voice actor who voices Batman to sing again, because that was pretty unbearable. I like seeing the Bat family incorporated into the story. I like Harley's friendship with Batgirl. I love the whole Mad Hatter episode. That was really great. And then seeing her become more and more of a good person, her being scared to use the word hero, is cool. It was pretty obvious that she wasn't always going to be in the villain role. And sometimes I do find it annoying that they don't commit to that, to the main character just being a villain and that being it. They always end up turning into a hero, like in, Megamind, or if you look at like Despicable Me or something like that, they always become good guys. They don't stay villains. But I do like that it's a slow progression. I like that she is kind enough to not reveal to the world that Bruce Wayne is Batman. Things like that I think are really interesting. So yeah, overall I do think this season is lesser than the other 2, but still pretty solid, and I hope it only goes up from here. So now moving on to Cobra Kai Season 5. If you've seen my video for Cobra Kai Season 4, you know that even though I liked it, I felt that it treaded water, and I found it annoying that Johnny and Daniel didn't finally team up to fight Cobra Kai, and they just went back to bickering. I thought that was very frustrating. And this season I really enjoyed because they finally did that after what I feel like should have happened last season. I wasn't sure about where they were going with the whole Mexico thing at the end of the last season. In this episode, they kind of just deal with it quickly. In the first 2 episodes, I think maybe they also were unsure about that whole thing. I mean, it is interesting to see Miguel trying to find his father figure, and then him being this criminal, and then going back to Johnny. I do understand the purpose of it, but it does kind of feel like they did things sort of random that wasn't entirely thought through. The introduction of Barnes from Karate Kid Part 3 was really awesome and welcome too. His incorporation, him not being a villain, was cool. I was expecting him to be on Silver's side. That didn't happen, and I love the misdirect with him at the store talking on the phone. seeing Daniel be angry and seeing how Terry Silver rips apart everyone is so cool, and I really love his interaction with Johnny, where he like calls him a pussy and then Johnny like asks him what's up, and he's got his like depression stubble. Their interaction was great, and I really love the whole thing with like Johnny taking care of Daniel and like letting him sleep in his bed and stuff like that. I love their friendship. That's all really great. Chosen is also definitely a highlight this season. I think he was incorporated extremely well on the show, and I was really worried with him towards the end. You know, they had set up that he wanted to talk to the girl from Karate Kid 2 who was in Okinawa, and that was a perfect setup for him to get killed, and I'm glad that he's still alive so he can still see her. His whole lesson with protecting the egg was great, and I totally didn't see it coming when they were going to incorporate that into the finale of the show during the brawl. I thought that was really smart and well done. It's nice to see Robbie and Miguel be friends finally after all this time, even though Robbie did make a really weird, inappropriate joke about Miguel getting fatherly advice, and he would just like played it off like he was joking. Their fight was really cool, and I really like the way that they settled their differences, just that both of them felt that was the worst day of their lives when Miguel was paralyzed. And then you've got Miguel's relationship with Sam. That was really sad when he, you know, like tried to stay composed, and he was able to, and then when he walks away he just breaks down crying and he leaves the necklace. That was so heartbreaking. Hawk and Dimitri kind of take a back seat this season, but I do think that they are used well in the manner that they're used. I really like Dimitri. I think he's a really funny character. And then their interactions with Miguel trying to get the necklace, and like that funny line of Hawk asking if there's one with less tentacles so Miguel doesn't have to pay as much. That was great. And then you've got Tori's arc. It's nice to see her switch over to Miyagi-Do / Eagle Fang. It's weird because now at the end of the season basically no one of significance is on Team Cobra Kai, so I wonder if we're just going to get a bunch of faceless nobodies, which would be weird, or if they're just going to introduce more characters now that everyone's essentially defected, except for Penis Breath, who of course was the traitor. I also think that the use of Stingray was really good this season, because normally I'm kind of like meh on Stingray. I think especially last season, but this season I think he was utilized really well, and his sort of explanation for being blackmailed basically by Silver and him being too scared to like come forward about the whole situation, that was great. And I love when he like pokes his head out of the car and he's like, "Mr. LaRusso, come with me if you want to live," and whatever. That was all pretty fun, and I do think I warmed up more to Stingray. I thought he was pretty good in the first 2 seasons. 3 I didn't like him, or in the first 3 seasons. 4 I didn't like him as much, and this season it's sort of winning me over again. And then you've got the whole thing with Kreese in prison. I wasn't expecting that. I didn't think he was going to die, but I thought he was stabbed and he was going to have a heart-to-heart with Johnny. And now he just got out of there, and it looks like he's going to start up Cobra Kai again, of course, now that Terry Silver is in prison. This is sort of some of the treading water stuff that I'm a bit scared of, because Kreese definitely had a heart-to-heart with Johnny when Miguel was hurt, and you saw that there was a bit of humanity in there that would go against Silver. But if Kreese is going to be the antagonist of the next season, I'm not really sure how I feel about that. I have a theory that maybe he's going to train Cobra Kai in secret, so, you know, he obviously he can't teach in the open because he's a wanted criminal. But yeah, I'm really not sure, and on some level I do enjoy that I don't really know where the show's going. I just hope they don't do repeats of previous seasons. Something that wasn't a repeat that I really liked, though, was Johnny being a dad with Miguel's mom, like them having a kid. That's all really cool, and I really like seeing Johnny try to step up and show up, you know, like cleaning his room and like taking down all the dirty posters and stuff like that, and like being like, yeah, I gotta like do this right, you know, this time, and not like fuck up. And then him getting the motivation to fight when he's all beaten up towards the season finale. That's all really, that was good stuff, with the picture coming out and him just like giving it his all. And then that also applies for when Daniel fights Silver at the end. I really love him remembering the stuff that he taught him from Karate Kid Part 3 and using that against Silver. That was all really great. I also think it was really sweet when Johnny said that the dojo should be called Miyagi-Do. I don't think Daniel should have stepped up and said the Eagle Fang thing. Like, I understand it was like they're trying to be respectful towards each other, but I think it would have maybe been better if in secret they were applied to the tournament as Miyagi-Do and Johnny did it without telling Daniel. I think that would have been a really sweet moment. Maybe they will eventually go full Miyagi-Do, we'll see. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed Cobra Kai Season 5. Much better than 4. I did like 4, but this one just did the stuff that I think 4 should have done by now. I don't know how much longer the show can go for. I think maybe one more season. 2 would even be a stretch, I think. Don't go past 2, that'd be crazy. And then there's now reports that Sony's doing another Karate Kid film that is apparently something that the writers have said that they're not involved with, the writers of Cobra Kai, so I don't know what's going on there. I really would love to see Hilary Swank's The Next Karate Kid from Karate Kid 4 show up on the show before it ends. They've said they've talked about that, and if she doesn't, I think that would be a real mistake and real disappointment. I mean, even this season we got the love interest from Karate Kid Part 3, and finding out that her and Daniel's mom were friends, or Daniel's wife were friends, and that's how they introduced. That was really clever and a really good way of incorporating her into the story. So that's the video. Thanks so much for listening. I will have a new review sometime soon. Werewolf by Night is coming out this weekend at the time of this recording. So yeah, thanks so much for listening. Have a good one.